Professor. This is Sai Singh. Actually, I'm gonna explain experimental versus non-experimental today, and I'm gonna turn off my video because I'm kind of shy. So let's begin with the topic without wasting any time. Actually, I chose the study done by Stan Milgram. So, firstly, I'm gonna explain about him and his contribution in psychology. Stanley Milgram was a psychologist known for his work in social psychology. He conducted the obedience study at Yale University in 1961, published the findings in 1963. The study aimed to explore the dynamics of obedience to authority, especially in situations when individuals were instructed to perform actions that conflicted with their personal morals. Actually, Stan Milgram was renowned social psychologist for his groundbreaking experiment. He born on 1993. He conducted famous obedience study in 1961 and published his finding in 1963 as explained earlier. And it was one of his most famous and controversial on the other hand in psychology. He has profound impact on understanding of human behavior and ethics in research. So this was his introduction. And my next slide is about experimental study. Experimental research is a scientific methodology of understanding relationships between different variables. In experimental research, like Milgram obedience study, scientists change things on purpose to change how it affects other things. Like in AI, it has independent variable. For example, Milgram changed things like having someone in charge or how to close people were to each other to see if it made people more likely to obey. Experimental research is a scientific method used to investigate cause, effect, and relationships between variables. In experimental study, the researcher manipulate one or more independent variable to observe the effect on independent variable while controlling for extraneous variables. In my opinion, this method allows researcher to establish causal relationship by systematically controlling and manipulating variables. Actually, it is widely used in various fields, including psychology. That's what we are talking about. It is also used in biology, medicine, and social sciences to test hypotheses, theories, and to provide empirical evidence for phenomena under the study. Heading towards non-experimental studies, on the other hand, doesn't involve changing things on purpose. Instead, scientists might watch what happens naturally, ask people questions, or look for patterns between different things without controlling them. Like example, researcher might ask people about their thoughts on authority and obedience in everyday situation without trying to change everything. Adding more non-experimental studies, they do not have manipulation of variables. They observe and analyze relationships between variables as they occur naturally. These studies are often used when it's not feasible or ethical to manipulate variables, such as in studies of human behavior or natural phenomena. These studies include observational studies, correlation studies, case studies, surveys, quality research methods, while they do not establish causations as definitely at experimental studies do. They provide valuable insights into patterns, associations, and characteristics of variables being studied. That's all for experimental studies. And I chose The experiment conducted by Reinhardt and Gerhardt in 2004. That's my non-experimental studies. Actually, that study aimed to investigate the gender identities of genetically male children who were born with penises. Actually, they tried to raise those males into females. Actually, they conducted a study to to prove that a nurture versus nature. Out of 16 subjects, the study found that 5 were living as females, 3 had unclear gender identities, 8 were living as males. Notably, 6 out of 8 living as males underwent male gender reassignment treatments to obtain masculine physical traits. This study sheds light on complexity of gender identity suggests that factor beyond social upbringing may influence it. And my next slide is about area of research. Hmm, actually, my area of research is social psychology, especially the willingness to obey the authority versus personal conscience. The two variables taken here are teacher and the learner. The area of research for non-experimental study revolves around the complex interplay between nature and nurture, as I explained earlier, in shaping gender identity. Actually, area of psychology, social psychology, non-experimental studies are common due to complexity, ethical consideration involved in manipulating social variables. Some common non-experimental research methods in psychology include observational studies, correlation studies, surveys and questionnaires, longitudinal studies, and the most important here is qualitative research. Each of these non-experimental methods offers unique advantages, limitations in studies, social psychology, phenomena, contributing to a comprehensive understanding of human behavior in social contexts. Talking about observational studies, the researchers observe and records behavior in natural setting without intervening or manipulating variables. And correlation studies, these studies examine the relationship between two or more variables without manipulating them. And talking about surveys, under this, researcher collect data through self-report measure to assess attitudes, behaviors of individual or groups. And the last one is qualitative research. Uh, uh, Qualitative research such as interviews, focus groups, and content analysis explore the subjective experiences, meaning, or perceptions of individual or groups. The next slide is about hypotheses that were made in Milgram study. No doubt, Milgram experiment was controversial, but Milgram experiment aimed to test hypotheses that individuals would obey authority figures even if it meant inflicting harm on others contrary to their personal moral values. And now I'm gonna explain the theories which were involved in Milgram study. Milgram posited that individuals exhibit two distinct behavioral states with social contexts. The first state was autonomous state. Um, I think in this state, individuals independently direct their actions and bear responsibility for the outcomes of those actions. And the second one is agentic state. On the other hand, individuals transition into agentic state wherein they surrender their autonomy to external authorities, allowing these authorities to dictate their actions. That proved the hypothesis, I think so. And then the theories which were involved. The first one was social influence theory. And the second one was agency theory. Third one was cognitive dissonance theory. And maybe the last one is situationism. Firstly, talking about social influence theory, this theory proposed psychologists such as Coutelier suggest that individuals are influenced by social norms, expectations, and behaviors of others. Milgram's study demonstrated how authority figures can exert significant influence over individuals, leading them to comply with commands even if they conflict with their personal values. And agency theories. This theory proposed by Milgram himself suggests that people have two modes of behavior: the autonomous mode, where individuals act according to their own volition, and agentic, where individuals defer authority figures and feel less responsible for their actions. And that's what Milgram showed how participants shifted into agentic state when instructed by experimenter. And the third one is cognitive theory. Developed by Leon Festinger, this theory suggests that individuals experience discomfort when their beliefs or behavior are inconsistent with others. On the other hand, in Milgram's study, participants may have experienced cognitive dissonance when they administered shocks to learners, but their obedience to experimenters' authority had justified their actions, reducing dissonance. And the last one is situationism. The perspective associated with researchers like Philip Zimbardo emphasized the powerful influence, powerful influence and the presence of an authority figure, experimental setting, influence participant obedience regardless of their individual characteristics. I think these theories, among others, help explain psychologists' mechanisms underlying obedience to authority as demonstrated in Milgram's study. They illustrate how social, cognitive, and situational factors interact to shape human behavior in obedience situations. Yeah. And now I'm gonna explain research design and data collection methods. The first point is 40 males, age to 20 to 50 from various occupations. Actually, they hired a participant by publishing advertisement on newspapers. Subjects were told that they were participating in a memory and learning study. They were assigned the role of teacher and instructed to administer electric shocks to a learner. The shocks increased in intensity with each character response from the learner. That was the procedure, and first one was the participants. Research design and data collection methods used. Let's talk about the instruments. A stimulated shock generator was used with clearly marked voltage levels ranging from 15 to 450 volts. That was huge. And manipulation includes variables such as proximity to learner, legitimacy of authority, and presence of dissent were systematically varied. That's weird, I think so. The main outcome, let's talk about data collection. The main outcome measure was the maximum voltage of shock subject was willing to administer before refusing to continue. Actually, they were ready to give the shocks because of the fear of authority, maybe, or they want to obey the authority. Let's talk about key findings and conclusion. The majority of participants administered the maximum voltage shock despite the learned apparent distress. And the next one is proximity to learner, legitimacy of authority figure, and presence of dissenting peer influence obedience. That's proved the hypothesis correctly. The non-experimental studies concluded that biological and social variables like play significant roles in determining gender identity. About different methods, the The teacher was given a list of word pairs which has to teach to the learner. The teacher would then read the first word of each pair, then read four possible answers. The learner would press a button to indicate his response. If learner was correct, the teacher would proceed to the next pair. If the answer was correct, the learner would receive a shock. So that's what the method used by them. On experimental studies such as surveys, observational studies can complement experimental finding by providing insight into a real world behaviors and attitudes. Now I'm gonna talk about appropriateness of methods used. The both methods, experimental and non-experimentals, have their own limitations and appropriateness. Experimental studies, let's talk about this first. Appropriateness, establishing causality, control over variables, replicability. Let's talk about its limitations. Ethical concern, generalizability, practical constraints. And it's non-experimental studies, its appropriateness, ethical consideration, its natural observation, exploratory research, and its limitations. They have less control over variables. They cannot establish causality between variables. They are non-experimental studies such as correlation study may suffer from validity concerns such as third variable, confounds of reverse causality, and experimental studies. Adding on, experimental methods are most appropriate when researchers aim to establish cause-effect relationships, manipulate variables under control, as in Milgram studies. Non-experimental methods are more suitable when experimental manipulation is not ethical, such as studying long-term effects for real-world behaviors. And I also refer the each source in my presentation. So that's all by my side, Professor.